October 2003, as I noted, 1,218 of us convened in New Orleans for that GEOINTEL 2003. It was an intense 3 days of seeking a way forward to do what the wars had shown us that we desperately needed to do. We had to improve the collaboration and the integration between industry, between the military and the intelligence community. And we had to get the GEOINT that the troops on the ground needed faster than ever before. Now, in the wake of that conference, we established a nascent community, which has blossomed in the 2 decades since into a diverse global community fueled by revolutionary innovation and founded on the common cause of national security. Now, the panel of leaders that will join me shortly have left an indelible mark on our community as they look back at how GEOINT has evolved over the last 20 years, and we look forward to the next decade. Now, in just a moment, I'll be joined by good friends and colleagues that were central to the development and growth of our symposium. Keith Masback, the owner of Plum LLC, Ronda Schrenk, our CEO at USGIF, and Marlie Mollett, a data scientist from NGA and a recent graduate of the University of Missouri at St. Louis. And let me also welcome to the stage our moderator, Dr. Christopher Tucker, chairman of the American Geographical Society. Now, Chris has spent the last 2 decades at the intersection of technology, strategy, geography, and national security. As an innovator, an investor, a social entrepreneur, author, strategic advisor to the U.S. national security community. And as chairman of AGS, he launched a multi-year strategic dialogue known as Geography 2050, focused on the vital trends that will reshape the geography of our planet over the coming decades. Now, please join me in welcoming our panel.
Sir, thank you so much. I really appreciated the history lesson we got at the beginning of the morning, the top of the morning. I thought I was going to have to carry that load, so I appreciate it. But you didn't ask one question. There's this one question. You asked who was here for the very first symposium, but who here has been to every single symposium?
Oh boy.
Stand up.
Awesome.
Go. It's a lot. I mean, if you think about it, the trials and tribulations of life, having babies, getting married, deaths in the family, there's a lot of reasons to not attend a GEOINT symposium. And like by some weird quirk of fate, like, you know, a couple have, but in the end, it's a journey that everybody's allowed to join in, right? We've had a quirk of fate this morning. Our founder, Stu Shea, who we all know and love, is under the weather, unable to join us. And honestly, my first set of questions were, Stu, tell me stories. Stu, tell me stories about the beginning of GEOINT. But we don't have Stu here, but we do have the great Robert Cardillo. And I've heard the stories about how this whole crazy thing got started. It was late at night. There might have been adult beverages involved. I mean, it's a great story, but like, I wasn't there. I didn't join. Stu approached me, I think the second year at an event, like, hey man, you want to be on the board of the USGIF, you know, like, but I missed the whole first year, but I think you were there. Can you start us with this?
I can, and it will be my story.
It's right. As an observer from the, like Stu, it would be like first person, right? But you were there.
I'll do my best to channel my now inner Stu.
Go for it.
As I try to impart the magnitude of that conversation. So it was the spring of 2002. And I was currently the Director of Congressional Affairs at the National Imagery and Mapping Agency, NEMA. And one of my responsibilities as the Director of Congressional Affairs was to monitor our monitor, a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Stouffer. And Director Clapper and John had an interesting relationship of which I was required to manage, okay, mostly keep them apart. We all know how Director Clapper felt about all staffers. John was special in that category. Anyway, so John says, well, Robert, I'm going out to the Space Symposium. And I go, okay, what's that? He says, well, it's a gathering of industry related to space access and space operations and space control and whatnot. And the government participates at some level in the conference. And I said, okay, where is it? And he said, well, we need to go to Colorado Springs. And I go, oh, twist my arm. Okay, I have to go to Colorado Springs. I have to go to the Broadmoor, even a better part of Colorado Springs, and participate in this conference. So we go, and eyes wide open, and I'm seeing what was my first opportunity to visit the Space Symposium. And as one might imagine, even though that was 21 years ago, I mean, it was vibrant, it was exciting. There was companies I'd never seen before, companies I had some history with, but it was a very, very eye and mind-opening experience. One correction, it wasn't late at night, it was actually early in the morning, because John and I had gone to the AGI suite. AGI, which was the claim to fame, amongst others, was Satellite Toolkit. And Satellite Toolkit was kind of the lifeblood of space operations and space monitoring, et cetera. And Paul Graziani, another one of our founders here at USGIF, was hosting this party in his suite at the Broadmoor. And I want to say it was 2 in the morning. Okay, maybe it was 1:30, maybe it was 2:30, I can't remember. It was a very long day. And, it's a party. And so we're having a drink, and it's Stu Shea, it is Steve Jakes, it is Dr. John Stouffer, it's myself. I don't know if Paul was in that circle. And John, Stouffer, turned to me and he says, why doesn't NEMA have one of these things? And I go, what things, John? He's going, this conversation, this conference and whatnot. And, I could imagine a million reasons, why at the time, but I didn't know how to answer him, other than immediately Stu picked up the conversation and he said, he's right. I'm happy to pick up the baton, and I'm happy to begin the process to take a look at how we would at least create the conversation that people were having in and around Space Symposium. So I think that was the original moment of at least the idea of, and then of course, Stu, being Stu,
did it,
right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, so a very different world back then, right? And yeah, there was a Space Symposium, but there was no GEOINT Symposium. Let's say 10 years after this whole thing was created, probably, I was texting with Stu this morning, he pointed out, he goes, 90% of the companies exhibiting didn't even exist. And I mean, I'm trying to replay the whole thing in my mind, going, yeah, that's probably about right. And then Ronda was pointing out when we were talking that, like last year, I think y'all did a survey, and 50% of the attendees, it was their very first GEOINT Symposium, period, right? So who here's your very first GEOINT Symposium? All right, look, 20 more. Just keep coming for the next 20. There you go, right? One of our panelists. So the world has completely changed since 2003. Tell me a story. I'm going to go down the line, because Ronda might be the newest CEO here, but you're an old school GeoInter also. I mean, you've been doing this. How many of these have you been to?
I was trying to figure that out. I think it's about 10.
10 out of 18?
18.
Yeah. There we go. 18 out of 18. There you go. So I want everybody to kind of tell me a story, their favorite story, and also, who would you thank? Like, who would you thank for all this kind of come together? Because it's been a crazy, crazy long journey. So I'll start with the old man here, and I'll work my way down.
Look, I'll take the easy one. Yes, the Space Symposium exists. So there was a model, right, for government-industry interaction. But I want to credit Joanne Isham. If she had not stepped up and been the willing NEMA lead, gone to USDI Cambone, Dr. Cambone was critical at the it wasn't necessarily approval because it wasn't government sponsored, but if we were going to participate, we needed to have the okay of our boss, Dr. Cambone. And Joanne took that on. Now, Joanne didn't take it on without Jim Clapper saying, fine, But as I remember, Jim was focused on NGA, right? Because his mantra was, we got to remove the ampersand that's keeping our agency apart, right? That imagery and mapping components. So he said, just make sure this doesn't perturbate my plan in about a year to become National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency. And obviously, I mean, that was a good concern, but quite frankly, the two things came together in a great way. So kudos to Joanne and to Jim.
Right. Keith.
Yes, I think a memory really, there are so many.
I know.
But it goes back to the government shutdown in 2013. The story of how that played out itself was interesting. Even with the government shutting down, there was a week before the symposium in the fall, government people were still going to get paid and government travel was still on. And it was only, so we were still going to have an event, even though the government was shut down, because the people we needed were going to be able to be here. And then just several days before the event, Congress said, you're not going to travel except for mission critical. And boom, we were done. And this was our first year in Tampa. And so we had printed all the signs, we had done all the work, we had shipped all the freight. Everything was ready for the event. We were only days away. When we immediately had to reschedule, taking the only week that was available in the spring of 2014, which was spring break, Easter, and Passover, all in 1 week. So I don't imagine why.
And it still worked out somehow.
Don't know why it was free.
Right.
And so we rescheduled the event, and we determined that the cost of printing the signage, which is, you now know, Ronda, is significant. We decided that we would term the event GEOINT 2013 asterisk, and we bought a bunch of asterisks and we put it on all the signage. And so that's why there was really, in a way, there was no GEOINT 2014, there was only GEOINT 2013 asterisk. I'm going to take two people I'd like to thank, or two. Amy McGranahan.
AKA Amy Correnti. Back in the day.
Right. Amy was there. She came from being Stu's EA to being the first employee at the foundation. Her next door neighbor was an attorney who worked on nonprofits. So she then later takes that relationship and turns it into paperwork to create USGIF.
All on her own, man.
Not many people understand that it was the concept of a gathering of now GEOINTers needed to have a conference to be associated with the celebration, shall we say. And then the foundation came after that as a means to carry all of that forward. And I think second, going back to 2013 asterisk, are the attendees and the exhibitors.
Yeah. A lot of goodwill.
There could have been a pretty significant cash flow crunch for USGIF at that time. And one of my favorite statistics was that 80% of our companies allowed us to keep their money that they had paid for their exhibits and hold on to it until the spring. And 90% of our attendees allowed us to hold on to their money until the spring. We didn't ask. It was just this outpouring of support from the GEOINT community that made it, we didn't have to go scramble, we didn't have to sell CDs out of our reserve. It could have been a really challenging time. And after all we had done as a community, the community stepped up and helped that process happen. It could have been a really traumatic time for the foundation, and our attendees and our exhibitors, our supporters, this community kept that from happening.
Yeah, a lot of goodwill. Rhonda, how about you? You're the current CEO, but you've been around this thing for a long time. You've enjoyed it. You've been part of the community. You've invested your blood, sweat, and tears. What do you remember? What's your favorite story, and who would you thank for all of this your experience in this?
So favorite story is so hard for all of us. And after getting to spend time with our USGIF interns, they're all grad students that will be working in the community, just a little plug for them, and with Marlie, I thought back to the very beginning. So in 2003, I worked as the aide for the then NEMA NGA director, Jim Clapper, and I was low woman on the totem pole and didn't get to go. I was bummed. So I got to go in 2004, And at that point, I had returned to my roots. I was an imagery analyst. I worked in Washington, D.C. in what we called Building 213 in a classified environment. And we only talked to each other. We didn't talk to industry. Sometimes we didn't talk to somebody in the next
row
hallway over. So coming to this was scary, right? All unclassified, trying to understand, and maybe you're going through this too today.
Can I have this conversation?
Right?
Yeah.
Can I have this conversation? Where is the line? What can I say? It was really intimidating. And then the eye-opening part where I got to see the senior leaders of our community on this stage and hear directly from them rather than reading about what they had said or hearing it through 5 levels of leadership. And then going on that exhibit floor and seeing the technology that was being developed, that was available to help spur my own creativity and taking it back to the office.
Right.
So I have like 10 examples, and I'll stay to that one for now. Who would I thank? Yeah, so I'll come to this last 5-year period during my time with USGIF. I would thank this man right here who has been at my beck and call, really, for assistance. Like text, Keith, what's happening? What's the background on this? The gentleman that couldn't join us today, Stu Shea, same. He's a very busy man and has been so generous with his time. Amy McGranahan, amazing. Amy was employee number 1 of USGIF, and it's like the Hotel California, right? You can never leave, and she has been a tremendous friend. And then to current day, this gentleman on the end who has been a tremendous partner to me. So thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Excellent. Marlie, this is your first one, so I can't be like, tell me your experience over the past 20 years.
Of course.
But you've been here an entire day,
Yes.
so tell me about your experience so far. And if you're looking around, like, who's already helped you out? I mean, you just showed up here, right?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think this is a really great opportunity. If we want to go to who would I thank, I would very much like to thank Ronda and everyone on the panel for giving me this opportunity. I have already seen the innovation that's going on here, which is really exciting, especially I mentor 5 students from the University of Missouri in St. Louis through efforts called the Gaia Lab. And they got to present their posters yesterday at the Forward event, so that is very exciting. And I hope to see them more today. Even the talk that was just previously on about the neurodivergence and recognizing, that we are a changing civilization and we are growing and expanding our technology, but also expanding our people. And I think that is, as a first-time comer, very valuable to see, and it's very encouraging.
Excellent. So Keith, I remember exactly where I was. I was on a train coming out of Manhattan, and I had been given the task by the USGIF board to hire a CEO. I chaired the Management and Compensation Committee. How boring is that? And we had gotten to know each other over a number of years. You had run the Frontiers office, you were at ADF East, you had done a bunch of things, and you kind of signaled you might be looking to some new horizons. And I didn't get the joke, I didn't get the clue, but I'm coming out of the tunnel and I'm like, I'm gonna hire Keith Masback. And I called you, and it clicked immediately. So you've been, in my mind, if Stu was gift number 1, you were, if Stu and Amy, Amy. If Amy was gift number 1 and Stu was gift number 2, you're definitely gift number 3 to USGIF. You've been through these eras. If you're gonna break down the GEOINT Symposium into eras, how would you do it? And I think everybody on the panel's got their own eras. Everybody in the audience does too. How should we think about the symposium? Forget about the foundation, right?
So first of all, I do want to correct the record about this hiring business because I later found out that it was not as simple as I thought it was.
Right.
I had done the paperwork. I had let the leadership, the ethics paperwork, I'd let the leadership of NGA know that I was intending to go out to industry for a little while because I wanted to come back. I felt that senior leaders who didn't understand industry, that was problematic. And if I could go out and understand a little bit better and then come back into the government, I would be a better senior leader. So I started to go to mentors of mine in the contractor world to ask about, well, what could I bring to a company like yours? And I had no idea. I mean, I had no clue. And I started going around one by one, and they were wonderful. They were giving of their time, and they shared insights with me, but none of them were offering me jobs. And I said, well, these conversations are almost fulfilling. And what's happening? And I later found out that my mentors happened to be, most of them, on the USGIF board, and they had colluded, and they had agreed that none of them would hire me, pending trying to strong-arm me into taking the USGIF job.
We had made a decision, yes.
You all had made the decision for me, unbeknownst to me. So that's really the answer, is that I was denied, there was collusion, and I was denied any other opportunity for employment.
Wow.
So very fortunate to be here.
Nice of you to own up to the collusion.
Yes.
Finally.
So now that that's been established publicly, I do think there's some errors, as we talked about earlier. I think 3 and 4, GEOINT 3 and 4, GEOINT Symposium 3 and 4 stand alone. They were fascinating events that bonded us all as a community, rallying around this term that we had made up, Geospatial-Intelligence.
Right. Startup days.
And the idea was, why don't we all get together and figure out what it is so we can go out and tell everybody else what it is. And it was a wonderful celebration that had a conference appended to it. I think after that, maybe 5 to 11 was a period of great growth as we got more and more involved in wars overseas. The money was coming into the defense and intelligence budgets. GEOINT was kind of coming into its own, and it was just a remarkable period of growth. And the better the events were, the more people found out about them, the more people wanted to be there. And it became like people were fighting, like you said, Ronda. It was a bummer when you had to stay back, when you weren't allowed to go, because not everybody in our entire community could leave at the same time. And then GEOINT 2012 to GEOINT 2015 was a unique time. We had sequestration in 2012, which was a gut shot to the event. It still managed to be a good event, but the crackdown on government spending meant there were far fewer government people there. It actually forced a different dynamic of a lot of teaming discussions in industry, because government couldn't be the focus. Because it was so limited by sequestration. We had 13 now, of course, 13 asterisk rolling into 14. And then Jim Clapper, as the DNI, had said, look, Keith, in this era, I can't justify sending a whole bunch of people away. Is there any way you could hold it in Washington? So we pivoted. If I remember, we broke a contract and moved the event to Washington. Now, the good news was we had 5,500 attendees that year. The bad news was it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same event. There wasn't the camaraderie. In the evenings, everybody went home, right? Because like 80+% of our attendees traditionally have come from the Washington, D.C. area. So that was a weird stretch. And then I'd say 16 to 19 was another period of growth and vibrant engagement. And then I got out right before COVID so that Ronda could take it, and I think 20 till now. So those are the eras as I think about them.
Yeah. So Ronda, you're the current CEO. Yeah. You've done some remarkable maneuvering for the organization through COVID. I mean, you inherited this at the best time ever, certainly the hardest time ever, and you've done an amazing job. That's just me to you. How do you think about the evolution of the symposium and where you're looking to take it?
Certainly. So 2020, we were forced to cancel our symposium. In 2021, we had to postpone our spring event, and we postponed it to the fall. And we brought it here for the first time ever. St. Louis raised their hand and said, we want you, we love you, USGIF, and we are geospatial. Lots of opportunity came through COVID. If you remember the very popular John Hopkins graphic, foot stomping the importance of geospatial intelligence for our world as we worked through the pandemic. Geospatial was then securely on the map, if you will. We went to Denver in 2022, and proudly we're back here. If you go out and you look at the show floor, one of the evolutions that we've made to reflect the landscape of the community is the floor is not just big exhibits and then small exhibits, as I see at some other shows. It's integrated with large and small, because that's how we work as a community. Our academic partners are on the floor, the research labs are on the floor. On the stage, we continue the rich tradition of all of the intelligence community, and as much of the intelligence community as we can bring with us. The Department of Defense, Maria Gervais was so amazing yesterday afternoon, if you had an opportunity to talk with her. So I would say COVID was difficult from a managing the USGIF, and it was sad as far as not having a symposium. We pivoted to offer hybrid and for a year, virtual only programming. Because
You're giving me PTSD right now.
Yeah. One of our mission focal points that started in 2003 with GEOINTEL conference and remains strong today is to build this community. So we worked hard to keep our community together, and to today we continue to build it. Yeah. We have, I think, maybe more exhibitors than we've ever had on the floor. Certainly more small businesses and startups, and we have more members than we've ever had before, which shows the strength of our community and the continued significance of this foundation.
Bright future and a great trajectory.
Can I build on that? Because Keith reminded us of the importance of the industry staying with us during tough times, right? You had it during sequestration and the delay. You know, Ronda, during the pandemic, companies had every reason, right, to cut back, to cancel, to say, look, we love the foundation, but we can't do this right now because of the macroeconomic climate, or we're dealing with excess fences and whatnot. And they stayed with us. Yeah. And that was critical because we needed them to in order to make it to the fall of 21, right? And so I think that talks to the power of what this is. This isn't, it's truly a team coming together.
Right, and it's not just an artifact of tax law, but this is a 501c3 charitable organization, not a 501c6 trade show, industry consortium. And I agree, like there's love out there. So Marlie, this is literally your very first event. And I'm just saying, you got gumption, you're on stage at your very first event. Thank you for that. So I'd love your thoughts. So members of the GEOINT community often mention that we face challenges with our talent pipeline, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you think the GEOINT Symposium and the community more broadly should address the need to attract, recruit, and retain the next generation of GEOINT professionals? You resemble this remark, right? So what are your perspectives on that?
Yeah, thank you. I really loved this question, especially because I feel like I've lived through some of it. And I do feel like I want to say I'm going to focus on the STEM area, because I actually graduated with a degree in physics and an emphasis in astrophysics, and then came to NGA as a geodetic earth scientist to work on AI machine learning to basically train neural networks to predict gravity anomalies in areas that we don't have them, to better our gravity map resolution.
So you're one of the dumb ones, is what you're saying.
Right, only a little. So the reason I want to focus on this STEM is because there has been, I believe, an inherited alienation behind the GEOINT community, or just intelligence community, especially with local communities like St. Louis. And I think this has caused a lot of lack of knowledge as NGA or the GEOINT community as a area for jobs, especially for the STEM world.
Right.
And the STEM scientists are so important. We can't maintain our worldwide products without those really foundational sciences, such as physics, math, computer sciences, and we especially can't maintain them because of the way we're going. We're going towards more use of technology and artificial intelligence and cloud computing, and all of these skills are skills that are really developed a lot in the foundational sciences. And I want to specifically say that I think the problem for retention is, again, because of the alienation a little bit that has been inherited through the idea that things have to be classified to maintain national security, which is true. But I think STEM is a really good way to combat this because science isn't classified. It's the use cases that are. So we can do outreach with STEM, especially K through 12. Statistics actually show that if a 12-year-old is not engaged in STEM by that age, then the likelihood of them graduating with a STEM degree decreases drastically.
Right.
So it has to start young. And I think also if you do this through outreach and through things like the USGIF and different outreach events that they do, and with academia, these students are then going to go home and tell their parents about it, and they're going to say, look at these cool science problems I worked on, look what we do, look how GPS works, look at how the magnetic poles move, and this is really interesting. And then it's going to slowly make the local communities really more comfortable with our presence, and I think that will greatly grow and help retain and attract for future GEOINT professors.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you, what does a GEOINT symposium kind of mean to you and your peers? But I should be asking you, like, what does the GEOINT symposium mean to kids K through 8th grade?
Right.
What does the GEOINT symposium mean to 12-year-olds?
Right. And
or 8-year-olds?
Right. And right now, do they know? Is there a way to help grow this for children? Is it a way to especially focus on collegiate level and continue with academia outreach and make sure their posters are in the exhibit halls and their ideas are seen, because they are the future. I just graduated last August, and we're gonna help lead everyone into the future. So,
yeah. Oh, I love that. So this question, go ahead.
Marlie, it's phenomenal. So it reminds me of a story. We endeavored to bring young people to the symposium. And in GEOINT 2013 asterisk, we had Admiral McCraven in Tampa as a keynote speaker. And when he heard that we had Air Force JROTC students downstairs working on a challenge, he asked if he could go down and see them. So the Air Force JROTC students were working on an analyst challenge. I think it may have actually been facilitated by the golden ticket winners. So we kind of mixed the streams of great young people. And so these young Air Force JROTC students are intensely working on this analytic problem. And in slides Admiral McCraven,
the head of SOCOM,
the person who had gotten bin Laden, and he was relatively iconic. And they had no idea who he was. He was in this nice crisp white uniform, and he wanted to be on one of the teams. And he really wanted to win. And so I have pictures on my phone because it was an amazing GEOINT symposium moment of Admiral McCraven, sleeves up, as his aides trying to get him to go to a meeting, working through this analytic problem with Air Force Junior ROTC students aggressively, and I don't think to the minute he actually then walked away that they ever really knew who he was, but they thought he was kind of cool.
And then let me just jump in there to 2023. Tomorrow, we will have students from the Gateway Global program that is run by Zakita Armstrong here in St. Louis that are high schoolers, right?
Oh,
so they'll be
awesome.
here on the main stage, and we have some special activities for them, and they'll be out on the floor. So yes, we are re-engaging with the pre-collegiate students to open the aperture for them to understand more about this wonderful profession.
I think that's just great. That's really what I think the GEOINT Symposium specifically could really help aid our future workforce in.
Awesome.
So I had a question when it was going to be Stu, but you're going to have to channel your inner Stu, right? So what was, as CEO, so you've got to channel your inner Stu, right? What was the main focus of your tenure as CEO? and we may have to help him with what Stu. Back in the day, right? And these are, half of these people, it's their first event.
I'll take a quick guess, and you guys make it better. But Keith, you said earlier, we went to New Orleans to figure out what was possible, and then we left New Orleans to explain to people what was possible. We were learning, right? Because we didn't really know. I can only imagine as the foundation tried to actually be a foundation with members that would send checks to be part of the foundation, the value proposition was probably hard to explain in those early days. So those of you who've seen Stu, you can imagine his personal, intensity was helpful, right? He was kind of a Lyndon Baines Johnson kind of a negotiator. The arm would start here, then you get closer, and before you knew it, your checkbook was coming out, and you were agreeing to get this man away from you. I don't know, but it seems like the initial challenge for a startup, right? Who's going to pay us, right? Or who's going to contribute to be part of this?
Selling the dream, selling the vision, right? Anybody have any caveats on Stu? What was Stu's #1 challenge?
Well, I think maybe, Ronda, you would say we've all shared this, which was differentiation, right? The idea to be a C3 versus a C6 meant that it was not all about a trade association. It was not about earning government contracts, but in fact, it was about building this community and advancing the trade craft, right? And so how did we tell the story that the GEOINT Symposium was different than other events, different than the Space Symposium, different than INSA events, FCA events, and DIA events? And how did we create that context for differentiation, and how did we deliver relentlessly on it? Again, like a startup must do, so that we kept faith with what we said we were going to do, right? We didn't want to have the same old event. There is a value to them. We wanted ours to be different, and we have all carried that opportunity and challenge.
Yeah. Rhonda?
Oh, was that like a double answer?
That was a double answer. That was a double answer.
So for me, we talk about pipeline, and it's the whole, the entirety of pipeline. It's as Robert and I showed this morning, the increasing source material and the capabilities with increasing capabilities of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and then amazing human beings like Marlie that come together to deliver even more insights, even faster than ever before. And we do that at events like this. We do it with the outreach, like with Gateway Global. Our scholarship program knocks my socks off every year, and we continued that all throughout COVID. We did not cut back. And our accreditation programs, where we work with high schools here in St. Louis and high school programs from the undergrad to the master's.
Right. So mostly from Marlie, but lightning round all the way down. So what excites you the most about kind of the GEOINT community's future, and specifically about kind of what young professionals can do right now to bring about this future?
I think what excites me the most is really the idea that we are going to be embracing technology. We are moving so quickly. If you think about it, my generation, we grew up, I can't remember a time whenever I didn't have a computer or a laptop accessible to me. And I think that we are going to evolve so quickly with our STEM students and everyone in the GEOINT community to advance our technologies in a way we've never seen. It's going to allow us to go back to the moon like we want to do, and maybe go to Mars. It will also allow us to combat things like climate change, which are really necessary for also national security. There's these events that we need to think about, and a lot of these things are some really hard science problems, and I'm really excited to see how the STEM community is going to grow, how the GEOINT community is going to grow with that, and also to see what project I'm going to be working on next.
All right. Lightning round, Rhonda.
All right, I'll make mine really fast because I echo what Marlie so eloquently said, and what really makes me hopeful is you and what you represent. I told the story of back in 2004 how I was blown away and scared, right? And you're already here in your career and light years ahead of where I ever would be in my geospatial career. So hats off to you.
Thank you for the
made my heart
opportunity.
sing.
Keith?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think very quickly, conceptually, we have often been out ahead of the technology. We knew we wanted to do things that technology didn't allow. And then sometimes technology caught up and we were still caught flat-footed.
Right.
But some of us were speaking last night, and I think we're in an era where the tech's getting out ahead of us, and we don't fully understand it, and conversations like this are going to be critically important. The one thing I'd like to quickly put in a plug for is, for 20 years, it's the USGIF staff and all their partners that have endeavored to make this happen and to deliver this. So I just ask you that when you see a USGIF staff member during the rest of the week, just give them a pat on the back, thank them, and all those who came before them, because really that's the heart and soul of what happens every year here.
Agreed. Mr. Chairman.
I'm declaring that the final answer to your lightning round. In my role as chairman, I get to do that. When I was opening this session with the origin story, right, all the way back to the Broadmoor and that early morning conversation, that ideation that Stu was involved in, I remember him leaving the conversation, as I said, and he said, "Robert, I'll take the baton, I'll run with it." Marlie, if you would join me on stage. I know it's a little kitschy, but I have the same baton that we had that night in Colorado Springs. Not really, we rolled it up about 45 minutes ago. But at least symbolically, you really are our future. I'm so glad you found us. I'm so glad we found you.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're excited about finding others, right?
Yes.
I'll say in this room, but help us find the people that aren't in this room. And
Yeah.
so with that, I'm going to symbolically hand you the roll of paper, that's a baton,
Why,
and
thank
all
you.
wish you well. Chris, thank you.
Wonderful.
Rhonda, thank you. Keith, thank you. Thank you all.
And thanks
you.
for all
Thank
of you
you.
for showing up. We'll see you in 20 years.